Hi, today we're going to take a look at the Sega Saturn cartridge, the Saroo. This is used to load games without the optical drive. It was developed by a guy called TP Unix a few years ago, or probably about 10 years ago. And this is the development board and everything that he had in place all that time ago. Ever since then, it pretty much went dormant. Then, not that long ago, some Chinese people out in their sticks decided they were going to revive the project and carry out some firmware fixes and bits and bobs, and hey presto, along come the Saroo card. This one I purchased through AliExpress. It also acts as a 1 meg and a 4 meg memory expansion card to allow some of the bigger games to operate, and it also acts as a save game facility to give you the internal or external saves. It runs off a micro SD card which you load all your ROMs on and the latest firmware. The firmware I'm using did come from TP Unix's GitHub page, because he has been doing some more development on this since the revival of this unit. I'm just going to take a quick look inside just to see what the internals of the card look like. Purely for interest, I don't really know much about these, so I'm curious just to see what's inside this. I didn't think this sort of thing was possible when we've talked about a lot of the other ODEs on my channel. We've talked about the Mode, the Fenrir, the Phoebe and the Satiator, which I'm going to do a comparison with a bit later on in this video. I was curious how they've actually got this to work. So looking at the board, it looks very neat and well done. There are different versions you can buy of this. You can buy like a premium version which has all new chips, or you can buy a basic version that has got reclaimed chips, which is odd, but it depends on what price you want to pay. The chamfering on the board is important where the cartridge slot is. A lot of these come with quite dull-edged ends of the board. You have to be very careful you don't damage the socket. Looking on the board, there seems to be some I/O buffers, an FPGA, and some other chips that all look very interesting. And again, I'm not really sure of exactly what's on here, but it really looks well made, and I'm quite impressed considering it is an AliExpress product. I did worry that this wasn't going to function. It does have some problems. We'll talk about that a bit later in the video. Again, the ODEs that are available, the Mode, the Fenrir, all pretty much have near enough perfect compatibility, where the Saroo, that seems to be its weakest part, isn't quite as compatible as a comparison with a lot of the other ODE drives. One thing that the Saroo does excel at is loading times. I think probably out of all of the ODEs, the Saroo is one of the quickest loaders, sometimes to its detriment. There are tweaks in the INI files and bits that you have to have on some particular games, purely and simply because it tries to load a bit too quickly, and therefore the game crashes and stuff like that. There are instances on Daytona and things like that where the card has tried to load a bit too quickly. So there are onward developing fixes and things for the Saroo card. The more this card saturates and more people get hold of it, it is shown that there are lots more fixes starting to come about for individual games. I have found this since I've used it. I've found a lot that this has the compatibility has increased no end. One of the things that I do like about this is that it fits into the Sega Saturn externally. You don't need to take anything apart. You can keep your ODE drive. It's completely no fix or no soldering or anything like that. Very much similar to the Satiator. So that's why I've included the Satiator in this review, because I wanted to do an apples for apples comparison with the two ODE emulators that do not require any internal modifications, and you can obviously keep your optical drive as well. So obviously going to move on now and just do a little bit of a show of what the Satiator is. This is it. This is basically a card, runs off a full-size SD card, unlike the Satiator. Uniquely, this was designed to go into the slot where the MPEG decoder card was allowed to go into the back of the Sega Saturn. So from an aesthetics point of view, you can't see anything externally. It plugs nicely into this slot in the back of the Saturn. It doesn't give the option for any memory, save data backups or anything like that, and it doesn't give you the 1 or 4 megabit card option for those few games that do require that. So the Satiator does bring a lot to the table in one package. Again, the only downside really of the Satiator I can see really is just some of the compatibility that needs to be tweaked. Okay, so this is the menu of the Saroo. As you can see, it's quite basic, it's just text based. You can, in the options, add a picture to the background and even some music. I've not tried really that hard to get it to work. This is the menu for the Satiator, reminiscent of old Windows, if you're that old and you can remember that sort of Windows, 98 sort of look. So doing apples for apples, comparing the two with Daytona USA. And to be fair, on first impressions, everything loads pretty much at the same sort of speed. There's no slowdown or hiccups that I found loading this particular ROM on either unit. As you can see, it all runs at full speed. Not really any problems at all that I've encountered. And pretty much, the Satiator has kept up with the Saroo. The Saroo does load a few games slightly faster than the Satiator. But again, that does bring problems with the way the Saroo works. There are some games that just crash or won't load properly or stutter, or the full motion video cuts out. So I have experienced some issues with the Saroo, but not many. And as I've mentioned before, the Saroo is open source, so it's always been developed for and improved, and I think in time the Saroo will become the go-to ODE replacement for the Sega Saturn, due to the fact that it is a Swiss Army knife and it carries all of the features that most Saturn owners have come to want over the years. So moving on to the next section, we're going to look at a bit of Sega Rally. These are probably the most prominent and best games for the Sega Saturn. They're really examples of what Sega could do with their first party studios, how they could really bring that Saturn to life. It's such a shame there weren't many people as talented as the in-house Sega team for extracting really what was uniquely brilliant of the Sega Saturn at the time. I personally believe that these games weren't possible on the PlayStation 1. Really, I think Sega really did a fantastic job, considering how hampered the Saturn's development was, and the problems they'd encountered and the things they'd changed, of how accomplished the Saturn was with these particular games in mind. So as we go through Sega Rally, I'm really pleased that this really does work quite well. It loads in spectacularly fast. The load times on most games is pretty much improved, compared to your disc counterparts. I do own the full-size cab of this, and this is a pretty faithful conversion. It's hard to see. All the little quirks and things of the original Sega Rally are all there. So as we move on to virtual racing, this game is a step above what was on the Mega Drive with the SVP, and a step above the 32X version. Even though the 32X version was quite a good conversion with the hardware that was on board, this brings it closer to the arcade original. A lot nicer, higher polygon count, a lot nicer frame rate. Not perfect, but a lot better play than the originals that have come before it. The Satiator brings this to the game pretty well. I haven't noticed any stuttering, load times are good. So this is another example of really what the Satiator and the Saroo can do, both of which perform perfectly with this game. So again, another 10 out of 10 pass. So we're going to move away from virtual racing now, and we're going to take a look at Wipeout. This is a really quick game, and I'm amazed that they got this to work as well as they did on the Saturn. I think it was primarily made for the PS1. I think all of its strengths in this game were tailored to the PS1. So to see the Saturn handle such a nice conversion, again, it's not perfect, and I don't think it's as good as the PS1 version, but I do think it is good. I think it's quite faithful, and I think it does the Saturn credit that the Saturn could keep up with the PS1 in the right hands. So how does this fare with the Satiator? Pretty much both of them are pretty identical. I think the Saroo loads this slightly faster than the Satiator, but there is not a lot in it. Load times, everything so far has been pretty faithful on either option, so I think you're pretty safe here to be able to play it on either device. I've played it on the mode and all the other, the Fenrir and all those, and again they all play just as nice. The big difference is that you've got to take the lid off and fit these units, which is not for everybody. I understand the mode is probably one of the more complicated, but with the mode you can have your disc images with pictures of the box art and stuff like that, which you can't do with these. Whether that will come one day, whether somebody gets in the hands of a talented developer that's going to bring that to it, I don't think it's impossible. I think it's just time really, and if somebody's prepared to put effort into working with these units and bringing more to the table, and I think the Saroo could literally be the one to beat.
I'm Chris Parton, the leader of the Burning Rangers.
So this is the last game I'm going to be showing. Again, it loaded in flawlessly. I'm really pleased that it worked out as well as it did. All the full motion video and all the other bits and bobs that this game brings really work quite nicely, so I'm really pleased that this is a pretty good showcase for the Satiator and the Saroo. In terms of which one's going to come out on top, I think the Saroo has it really, even at this stage, purely and simply because it's got the 1 megabit and the 4 megabit RAM expansions. Not that you're going to use those a lot, because there's not that many games that use them, but they're there and you haven't got to do any swapping or anything. The fact that it has save game utility in there, that you can save your game saves in there, again another string to its bow. And because it's open source, I believe that it's going to go from strength to strength, and we're going to see a lot more from this card now that we've got it working and it's in a usable format. I think we're going to see a lot more come to the table with this, and I'm quite excited to see what they can do with this card and what extra features they're going to come and add in the future. So if you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again in the next video. Bye for now.